Recently played my first game of a Game of Thrones. I know I must be the last gamer on Earth that have not tried it yet, and I knew that the game was long and complex, but I thought, I don't know, maybe after the game, we may have time to play a quick filler, kind of like as a way to decompress. So, on my way to the place where we're going to play a Game of Thrones, I stopped at the friendly local game store and I picked up a game called Drako. It has been around for a while. It is a two-player game, lasts 30 minutes or less, and it seemed very easy, very simple, very basic. So I thought maybe this is going to be a good filler. Also, like the fantasy theme. So I picked up a copy. We didn't end up playing it the same night as a Game of Thrones, so I think it's okay. It would have been unfair to this little honest filler to compare with the Game of Thrones. But then I played it since, and I'm going to tell a little bit about what I think regarding this game. The game comes with a board, with a pretty nice looking board with four miniatures, a dragon, and three dwarfs. And that also tells you what the theme is. It is a fight between a dragon controlled by one of the two players and a team of three dwarfs controlled by the other player. There's only a limited amount of time that the dwarves have to destroy the dragon, and if they do so before the time runs out, the dwarves player wins the game. If the dragon survives until the end of the game, or if the dragon manages to to kill all of the dwarves, then the dragon player wins the game. This is a possible setup. At the beginning of the game, you set up the dragon in the middle of the board, and then you place the three dwarves anywhere not adjacent to that spot. And this that you see here is pretty much a good beginning position for reasons that will emerge later. Each player also has a board, such as the ones that you see here, which I use to keep track of the damage that your character or characters receive. Each dwarf has his own life track. Every time that one of your characters is wounded, you place a wound marker on one of those spaces, and when one of the tracks is filled, then the corresponding dwarf dies. Something similar happens to the dragon. The dragon has several tracks, as you can see. First, a generic track. The first couple of wounds that the dragon receives are placed here. Once this is filled up, then the dwarf player can start targeting specific areas of the body of the dragon. And when one of these three tracks is filled, the corresponding part of the body of the dragon doesn't work anymore, which limits the abilities of the dragon. For example, if the wings are disabled, the dragon cannot fly. If the throat is disabled, the dragon cannot breathe fire anymore. And if the feet, the legs are disabled, then the dragon cannot move, has to sit there and try to bite people or to roast them, or can try to jump around using flight. If all of the spaces on the board of the dragon are filled up, then the dwarf player wins the game. This is a card-driven game, even though the word usually is used to describe much more complex games. Mechanically speaking, this is a card-driven game. Each of the two players has a unique deck of cards. The decks are different in the philosophy behind them. And at the beginning of the game, each player draws 4 cards from his deck, and then the dragon player plays first, and then the game switches back and forth between the two players. When it is your turn, you have to perform 2 actions. An action can be to draw 2 cards from your own deck. 2 cards are an action, or you can choose to play a card and resolve the effect of the card. That means that effectively in a turn, you could draw up to 4 cards, you could draw 2 cards and perform an action, or you could play 2 cards to perform 2 actions. The basic idea is that these cards will allow your character or characters to move. a certain number of spaces, or to attack, and the different types of attacks, and sometimes to perform special tasks. And what you can do with the certain card by playing it is described on the icon or icons in the top left corner of each card. Well, also now you can have a close-up at the art, which I find pretty enjoyable. I really like the art on this game. This icon can be used to bite or try to bite an opponent. So this is an attack that you can perform if you're adjacent to an opponent, and this is the damage that you inflict if that attack is not stopped. To stop your attacks, the opponent needs to play from his hand cards that have that icon on it. A single shield icon will stop any one attack. It doesn't matter how intense it is. If the attack is stopped, then both cards, the attacking card and the defending card, are discarded. Otherwise, this amount of damage written by the icon is inflicted on the target. Or, in this case, you could use this card to move by one space. This is the shield icon for the dragon, which is used to stop attacks from the dwarfs. As you can see, you have different combinations. For attack, it can be stopped like any other attack, but it can target multiple dwarfs as long as they are in a line. Pretty much you choose one of the 6 axes surrounding your dragon, and you can fire in that line up to the opposite side of the board, and everybody that's in there receives that attack. Powerful breathing here. Flying, you jump to any one location on the board. Yeah, I think these are the main ones. This is a good jumping action. Yeah, I think this covers what the dragon can do. But now at least you can also have a sense of the mix of actions. The dwarves have a similar deck. They also have a shield icon. They also have a move icon. They have this icon here, which is used to attack an adjacent enemy. And again, that is the number of damage points that you inflict if the attack is not stopped. Moving or defending. Range attack. One of the 3 dwarves only has a crossbow. If this dwarf is still alive and has a straight line of sight to the dragon, then what is it? Then that card can be used to perform a range attack, which needs to be stopped as usual or goes through as usual. This is interesting because it allows multiple dwarfs to attack at the same time, as long as they're all adjacent, and, well, you know what happens if the damage goes across. Shields, attack, movement. There's a card that I wanted to show you, which is the net card, and of course now I can't find it. Here we go. One of the dwarfs is armed with a net. If this guy's alive and you play this card, then you have a net token, which you place on your board at the beginning of the game. The net token is placed by the dragon, and now the dragon cannot move. The dragon cannot move until the dragon player spends 2 action, which is, for intents and purposes, giving up a full turn to remove that. But the dragon can still bite and can still defend and can also still breathe fire, but cannot move from there. And there are, of course, advantages to do that. Once the dragon destroys the net, then the net is returned to the dwarf player. There's also a special ability that one of the dwarves has, and which is not linked to any of the cards. It's called Fury. Once per game, you can spend this token, and you can inflict a point of damage on one of your dwarves, this guy that has the Fury ability, and then that turn you can spend 3 actions on your dwarves instead of 2. Pretty expensive, but it can also be fairly decisive. Well, this is pretty much the main idea. The players move around, attack, defend, using cards. If the dwarf player reaches the bottom of his deck, that is, all of the cards have been played and the dragon is still alive, then the dragon player wins the game. The dragon player wins the game also by destroying all the dwarves. The only way for the dwarves to win the game is to kill the dragon before the dwarves run out of cards. I personally enjoyed this game. I enjoyed it for what it is, which clearly is a very light filler and a quick-paced one with some good theme thrown in, with good art, and with some tough decisions emerging from time to time. With a bluffing component, I really enjoyed that. You may have a powerful card, but you may have to probe the hand of the opponent by using not so good cards, so that you force the opponent to waste waste defense cards until you inflict a powerful hit. And when you are the opponent and the player starts inflicting or launching against you small attacks, you had to figure out if those are preliminary phases to a larger, more powerful attack, or that's just what the opponent has in his hand at that time. That is to say that there is a good amount of decisions and layers that are captured by this game. Now, of course, by saying this, but I'm gonna say, but there are still so few such things. It's still such a light game. Of course it is. I'm comparing this game to similar games in the filler category, not to a Game of Thrones or to Shogun or stuff like that. In the filler category, for a game that you can set up in a couple of seconds, that can be played in 30 minutes or less. And again, as I said earlier, it really has a fast pace. Players just, once they get familiar with the rules and the actions, they just play very fast. The actions moves along quite quickly. Because if you consider all these things, I think that this is a quite solid filler. Definitely I enjoy playing this game. Again, if you're looking for something heavier, more complex, you do not have to knock on the door of this game. There are other options that you may be interested in. But for what it is, I personally found that this game works. There is a certain degree of tension. The two sides are completely different. There's just a different frame of mind behind them. So if you switch sides, you increase the replay value of the game. And my impression is also that the two sides are pretty well balanced. When victory comes for the dwarves, it tends to be towards the end of the game as the deck of the dwarves is running out, so there's a definite degree of tension there. If anything, I found, that's my impression, I don't know if other people had similar impressions, that playing the dwarves requires a little more of finesse. The dragon player can squander resources, but the dwarf player really needs to budget things, to time things well, to find the right synergy between the cards, because you may have cards that you do not need, then you have to discard them, you have a hand limit of 6. Discarding cards for the sake of it is tragic for the dwarf player, precisely because that means that your timer is now running faster. So it would be better if you never exceeded your hand limit. But in order to do that, you need to keep your hand effective, you need to do some management there. So I just found that an effective dwarf player has very fair chances against an effective dragon player, but the dwarf side seems to me to be a little more unforgiving if you make mistakes or if you just started playing the game. Little, small, fast game. It looks good, it looks nice. You can just toss it on the table and play it real quick in between other games. I like the theme for a fantasy game that you can play in under 30 minutes for a filler that doesn't require too much thinking. I think the Drako is a good option. Some will find it too light for them, but when I'm looking for a filler, this game is not too light for me, and it is a game that I enjoyed playing.